Thanks everyone. And today I'll be talking about the recent announcements around data and AI that has been done at Build 2020. And kudos to Microsoft first of all, because this is the first virtual event that they organized for Build, and it was a tremendous success. And also a lot of hard work has gone behind the scenes. And we look at as an event, like we logged on to Teams and looked at all these sessions. But I think in the last minute, they had to do a lot of organizing things around making this event a virtual event and also making it successful. So thanks Microsoft for that. Before I get into the session, a little bit about myself. I'm Anupama Natarajan, and as Annie was mentioning in her keynote session, I was born and brought up in India, and I've been moved to New Zealand and living in Wellington, and I have been living in Wellington for the past 19 years. So I still have the touch in with India and also the community, and it is nice to see there is a whole heap of Microsoft MVPs in India and less number of female MVPs. Being a female, I would like to see more women getting into the MVP space, especially from India. And anything that I can help for the community over there, happy to do so. If you want to reach out to me post this event, feel free to reach out to me through any of my social channels. And a little bit on my career, like I have got 20 plus years of experience working in the IT industry. So predominantly started my career as a developer and moved on to like data and currently focusing on AI. So I'm a Microsoft MVP for AI and a certified trainer as well as a speaker. And I organize a lot of events in New Zealand, especially around Wellington, the SQL Saturdays, the boot camps, as well as the local user groups here. So the things that I want to quickly walk through are around data and AI announcements that was made around Build 2020. So if you're thinking about like I'm going to go deep dive around these topics, it's not the case. What I'll be touching upon is what are the recent announcements that they have made on these type of services that was already available. So if you're looking at in-depth sessions around this, I'm planning to organize a session specifically at the user group in Wellington, and I will share the link with the MVPs in India. So you can just reach out and join those sessions where you will get some in-depth demos around these announcements. So what we will be covering today is around the data announcements. Microsoft made a few announcements around Cosmos DB. What are the different enhancements that they have done? And similarly with the open source databases they support on Azure. So if you haven't noticed, Azure doesn't only support your Azure SQL, but they also support PostgreSQL, MySQL, and MariaDB. So some of the enhancements that they announced at Build was around PostgreSQL and MySQL, and we'll be looking at that. And of course, like Azure SQL Edge. And I think when Annie's keynote, she specifically mentioned like technology is just an enabler. So we are not using technologies for the sake of just coming up with solutions. We need to identify the problem for our clients and how then we can use technology to solve those problems, because that's the way developers as us or data engineers or even like a data scientist have to think. It's not about just using cool technologies. It's all about like how do we use the technology to solve my customer problem. So one of the biggest announcement which Microsoft made at Build 2020 was around Azure Synapse link. So Annie mentioned about Azure Synapse Analytics in the keynote session, which was more around how it is bridging the gap between having a separate data warehouse for analytical data and operational data. How do we bridge that gap, and how do you get real-time analytics from your operational data stores? And that's what Microsoft introduced as part of the Azure Synapse link. And then they also introduced some enhancements around Azure Netapp files, which we'll be looking at shortly. When you come back around AI announcements, Annie touched upon responsible machine learning. So it's not about just doing machine learning. How do we do that? Taking into a lot of things into consideration, like privacy, which plays an important role in most of the countries. We also will be looking at some of the bot service and framework updates that was announced, along with cognitive services and cognitive search. And what are the recent projects that Microsoft is working on, especially around building and operating autonomous systems. So without any further delay, let us start looking at some of these announcements around these products. So the first major announcement around Cosmos DB is Microsoft is going ahead with introducing Cosmos DB in a serverless fashion. So I think when we talk about serverless, they introduced Azure Functions where you can run functions for a limited duration and you pay for that duration. Then the serverless concept came into Azure SQL, and now they have introduced the same serverless concept for Azure Cosmos DB. So you may be wondering like, why do you need a serverless concept for Azure Cosmos DB? The rationale for that is a lot of application developers, they use Cosmos DB as a backend, but some of these applications may not be like a mission critical application or business critical application. It may be like a small application which is used by a small subset of users. So, and also there may be a need, the application has to run only at around certain amount of time, and after that it is not of any use for anyone. So in those cases, like there is no point in paying a price for continuously, rather than you can just pay for what you use. And that's the rationale behind bringing in a serverless concept with the Azure Cosmos DB. So it's cost effective, and also like you can just increase the workloads as and when you need based on your traffic patterns. And finally, like in Cosmos DB, it's all about the operations that you perform, and your pricing will be based on the operations that you are going to perform using your application. So I think you can easily understand like why Microsoft is introducing the serverless concept in Cosmos DB. The other announcement that they made was around the data recovery options in Cosmos DB. So bring your own keys. So if you haven't heard about what it is basically when you want to do encryption of your data, you don't need to use the keys that Azure is producing. Like you can have your own organization keys that you want to use for your encryption purposes. That currently is now available for Azure Cosmos DB. Similarly, like recovering your data from a point in time backups, which is key for a lot of organizations. Because if you want to just roll back your information and take things that has been happened a few hours ago, quite easily now you can do that with the Azure Cosmos DB. And these are the other enhancements. I won't go depth with that, which is around in the next version of version 4 of the Azure Cosmos DB for Java SDK, as well as the new delete functionality that they have introduced for the Cosmos DB change feed. So some of the new enhancements to keep in mind with Azure Cosmos DB. So the next part is your Azure Cosmos DB autoscale. So if anyone is thinking about autoscale feature like me, I'll be more curious because I work a lot of projects with my clients in New Zealand here on like mission critical applications where like the guaranteed availability is really important for most of these applications. When it comes to mission critical applications, I'm talking about like applications that we use in the emergency sector. So where the 99.999% of availability guarantee, if a service is providing, that is going to be really handy for us. And also like the SLA supported with those availability guarantee that you get from Azure, that is also is going to be valuable for organizations. And this is not, I'm telling it from a theoretical perspective. I'm working on a mission critical project currently for a client, and I understand what this availability really means, because in some scenarios, like if you don't have this availability, then probably there is a loss of people's life also. So that's the type of projects that we are working on where availability plays an important role. And with Cosmos DB currently, like now you have got a ability like you get the 99.999% availability, along with the ability of if you want to just increase the performance of your Cosmos DB, you can go ahead and automatically increase the performance of your Cosmos DB. So this includes like your throughput, whether you want to scale up or you want to scale down, you can quite easily do that. The next thing is around the open source capability on Azure. So if you haven't been introduced about PostgreSQL and the availability of MySQL on Azure, they have got all the features that you can get on your on-premises implementation. Along with that, if you have been using the Azure SQL on capability, then probably like most of the features that Azure SQL has got, it's also brought into these open source databases hosted on Azure. A classic thing is the Azure Active Directory authentication. So this is not only now available for Azure SQL, Now it has made it generally available for PostgreSQL as well as MySQL. And also like you have the ability like you can reserve the instances for 3 years and you get a special pricing or discounted pricing for that. And similarly, like for data encryption, you can bring your own keys again, similar to what I mentioned for Azure Cosmos DB. So just keep an eye on some of the announcements that has been made on these open source databases. And I would definitely recommend like if you are still thinking about using PostgreSQL and MySQL on premises, just start exploring the capabilities that are available on Azure, because when it comes to performance and monitoring capabilities, like you have a better like value that you get out of Azure rather than doing it on premises by yourself. The next enhancement that was announced around Azure SQL Edge. If you haven't heard about Azure SQL Edge, what Azure SQL Edge is nothing but like you can now run Azure SQL databases on IoT devices. That's really fascinating because have we ever thought about running SQL Server on IoT device? And now you can do that. And you can quite easily run that, as well as instead of like if you have models like machine learning models that you want to run immediately on the device, you will be able to do that quite easily. Just installing your like machine learning models on the edge devices as well as utilizing. So what we are talking here about, you can do data capturing of data as well as analytics at the edge devices level by using the Azure SQL Edge running on those devices. So that's something to keep in mind. And now it is available in public preview post build 2020. So this is one of the favorite announcement I really liked, which is Azure Synapse link. The reason is like I come from a data background. So even though I say like talk about AI, which I think Annie has clearly put in her presentation, like data is fundamental for anything. So if you want to do AI, first thing is you need to make sure you have got relevant data available in your organization. So coming back to the reason why I'm passionate about data, because I deal with operational data for my clients as well as with the data warehouses, which they use for analytical purposes. So the challenge always been like, okay, how do I take this operational data and give them real-time analytics? And sometimes like I have worked with customers where they want to see the real-time data analytics over that in comparison to the historical data that they have already got in their data warehouse. It's quite challenging for us because we have to now maintain two different processes of data ingestion as well as like a real-time dashboard versus like an analytical dashboard connected to our data warehouses and so on. But now looking at Azure Synapse Analytics and especially the Azure Synapse link that was announced as part of build, now they are using this architecture called hybrid transactional analytical processing. So what it really means is instead of doing a ETL, so you have an operational database and you are getting all the live transactions that are coming into your operational database. And now you want to do real-time reporting. What you can do is you don't need to worry about like, okay, I have to do an ETL process, take the data from my operational database, push it into my data warehouse. Instead, with the Azure Synapse link, you can in real time connect to your operational data store, pull all the transactions as they are coming in, and you can produce analytics quite easily without the need of doing ETL. And I think if you watch Rohan Kumar's session video, like which really puts through how you can do that with Azure Synapse link, I have got the URL at the end of the references section of the slide, which I'll share post this event. And it is a good video to watch to get a good understanding of what Azure Synapse link is and how powerful it is going to be for organizations. So currently Azure Synapse link is the ability to connect to the different data stores like operational data stores in real time to pull the data without the need of using ETL. So it is available for Azure Cosmos DB, and sooner it is going to be available for other operational data stores like Azure SQL and Azure Database for Postgres as well as MySQL. Watch this space. I think if you are a data warehousing person, I would definitely recommend like a data engineer or a data warehouse person, jump on to Azure Synapse Analytics and start upskilling yourself. The last one is around the Azure Netapp availability. So now Microsoft have just enhanced the availability, again increased the SLA for that, and as well as most of the mission critical applications like the SAP or e-commerce systems pretty much can use the Netapp as their backend, and that is going to help them in terms of making use of these availability needs that they require for those applications. So with this, I will quickly jump on to some of the announcements that was made from the AI perspective. So the reason I went through data first, as you know, like data is the key and fundamental. Without data, like doing AI is going to be challenging for organizations. When it comes to the AI announcements, one of the key things that was announced as part of Bill 2020 is all about responsible machine learning innovation. So what it really means is like understanding like your data and as well as the models that you create using that data. Because what you need to be making sure is like, okay, how the model is getting interpreted and is there any type of fairness available instead of thinking about any bias that has been applied in those models. So just that is important to understand. And the next thing is protecting the data that was used to build those models, because privacy is an important thing. So if you are just disclosing things that you shouldn't be disclosing through your models, then you need to be really careful like how the privacy concerns are getting addressed. And finally, control. Control is all about like how do you manage the granular set of permissions that you apply on this data, your models, as well as any experiments that you are doing for your organizations. So these are some of the key things that you have to understand, especially like when you're doing machine learning models. So it's not about like thrashing the data all over the place as well as building the models without clear interpretation or understanding like what are you trying to convey, because these are important things that needs to be considered before you put your machine learning models in front of your customers. So I think a lot of work I think Microsoft have done more in this space around how do like data engineers think about machine learning from a responsible ML perspective. The next enhancements was around bot framework and Azure Bot service. I don't know like how many of you have tried this. Hopefully, like being a technology country in India, like everyone would have touched Bot framework as well as Azure Bot service. Personally, I have done that too. And when it comes to like the build announcements, the focus was the Bot framework SDK has now got Teams integration. So now you will be able to just create bots, especially from an organization context, like I'm building an HR bot or an IT bot or something, quite easily, like you can integrate your bot with Teams. And this is really handy in the current scenario where a lot of teams are working really virtually. Bot Framework Composer, and this is a tool that was like announced and it was available in preview for quite some time. And with Build 2020, now Bot Framework Composer is actually made generally available. So if you haven't heard about Bot Framework Composer, it is basically a tool which Microsoft has provided. So where you can just go and create bots using graphical user interface. So you don't need to cut code or anything. You can just go ahead and just start creating your bots by using a set of wizards. And there are a lot of sessions like around the AI, Global AI Tour and Global AI Bootcamp. So if you check some of those videos where there were a lot of demos that was put around Bot Framework Composer. So this tool is now generally available post Build 2020. And the next one is the Bot Framework Skills. So Bot Framework Skills is like about creating no code or low code bots. So this is really getting hot in the market, and especially around the Power Platform announcements that Annie was making, like more around the Power Virtual Agents or the Power Apps and things. So what Power Virtual Agents, which is part of your Power Platform, allows you to do is to create bots without the need of writing a code set of or no code at all, basically. And this is mainly targeted towards your citizen developers, as he mentioned. And finally, the Azure Bot service. So now like bot service is basically focusing more around how do we improve the customer service using the Azure bots, which means like you can easily now create bots where the customer actually speaks to a bot, and if the bot cannot target like answer the customer's questions quite easily, it can redirect it to a human agent also. So this is just better way of doing customer engagements rather than making our customers frustrated because they are not getting actually the customer service they are looking for. So watch that space also, because there were quite a few enhancements that have come, especially around how do we introduce like omni-channel for improving the Microsoft customer service, especially around the organizations who are incorporating bots. So the Azure Cognitive Services announcements, I think there is quite a number of talks after mine that is going to be targeting around some of these topics which I'm touching on in detail, especially around cognitive services also. There were quite a few announcements that has been made or enhancements that has been made in cognitive services around Build 2020, and also like last week there are quite a few more announcements that has been made. And one of the catchy thing that I had from heard from last week was the Forms Recognizer, which is now currently generally available, which was previously in preview. And that is a cool service which I really personally like, because a lot of my customers had problems with their forms, which now we can use to help them to solve their problem. But coming back to the Build 2020 announcements around cognitive services, with the personalized service, like you have now got the apprentice mode. So I think you know what apprentice is, but it's more around like how can you start learning and then understand like how can you use that learning into practice. And now that capability is available as part of the personalizer API within cognitive services. There are a few more enhancements around the speech service. So now speech to text is now supporting to another 27 languages, as well as they have improved 30% word error rate reduction. So that is really handy, because if you're thinking about where this is really handy in real world scenarios, it's more around I have seen a lot of call centers where they talk, understand the customer problem, try to give the solution. And sometimes they don't have enough time to just record or note down in their CRM systems around what is the solution, what was the question asked, and what is the solution they provided, which is a valuable information, because as an organization to measure engagement with the customers, they need to know what was the discussion that was happening between the operator and the customer. So with the speech to text service, like what it gives the organization the ability is, as the questions and answers are happening, like that can be automatically transcribed and attached to your call center call, like what do you say, the application. So that is really valuable for organizations. And finally, containers. So if you have heard about running cognitive services on containers, now you should be able to just deploy language understanding and text analytics, which are generally available to be deployed on containers. And few more enhancements that they have done in the improvising the LUIS. And this is more about how do you just understand better about the language structures and extract the context out of that. And also like a few more enhancements around the Q&A maker. The one thing which I really liked about is the role-based access control that you can do in Q&A maker. So that gives you better control on how do you manage or provide access to your knowledge bases. So quickly jumping on to Azure Cognitive Search. So with Azure Cognitive Search, we can now just to do a lot of custom search ranking. So this is again in preview mode. What it means is like now you are searching against a lot of not only your textual documents, but also like unstructured data. So now you can even create some sort of ranking of that resultant data using the cognitive search. And as well as cognitive search is getting the Azure machine learning integration again available in preview mode, as these are the two things that majorly that was announced as part of Build 2020. So the last one is the project Bonsai. So what this allows you to do is Microsoft have kickstarted this experimentation. So this is mainly how do we use machine learning, and instead of just extracting the knowledge from data alone, instead you extract the knowledge from the experts. So these are, when I say experts, these are from people. So Project Bonsai is more around looking at an opportunity of how do you get the knowledge out of the experts who are actually doing certain things in a repeated fashion, and how do you incorporate that into a need of an AI system or a machine learning model. And the last one is around also creating AI agents that you can mainly use, like you can use it either in edge, cloud, or even on like IoT devices. So these are some of the things that they have announced as a new set of projects, which are currently in preview as part of Build 2020. So I touched upon a few things in terms of the enhancements that was announced with both data as well as AI. So here are some of the references which I was talking about. If you haven't attended the Build 2020 sessions, you have got the mybuild.microsoft.com or even Channel 9, which has got all the on-demand videos that are available. So you can go back and watch some of these sessions that out of interest for you. And also like Microsoft, every year they publish a book of news which contains about all the different announcements that they make across the different product stack as part of Build. So here is the link where you can go and find that information. Sorry, because here, because of the time, I have just given the synapse of around data and AI announcements. But if you open the book of news, you can see across all the Azure products, like what are the different enhancements that has been announced as part of Build 2020. The last one is the Azure Synapse link. I talked about Rohan Kumar's video to watch, and here is the link for the same. So watch that video so you have a better understanding of the power of Azure Synapse link. So with that, I will wrap up my session. And once again, thanks for the Indian MVPs as well as Deepak for giving me this opportunity to present at the Azure Chennai Azure meetup. And yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But due to time constraints, if I can't take up any questions right now, feel free to reach out to me through my social channels and I will publish the slides post this session. And thanks everyone for the opportunity.